Let's take a very quick walk in the international sphere. Almost a year has passed since the 24th Feb Russian invasion of Ukraine. CNN News 18's managing editor Zaka Jacobs spoke exclusively with the US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, about the war itself over the last 1 year and India's decision to buy oil from Russia and what that's meant. Take a look at this conversation.
So it's a big year for India diplomatically as it assumes the G20 presidency. A lot of variables at play, from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, the ongoing border standoff between India and China, and of course, let's talk about all of this and more. I'm now joined by the US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18.
Thank you, Zaka. Great to be with you.
Let's start with the biggest ongoing clash that is between Russia and Ukraine. What is the U.S. assessment of where the war stands right now as we pull up on a year since it began? And the million-dollar question everyone's asking, how is this likely to end?
Well, Zaka, as you have said, it is almost a year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and it has been very brutal and cruel, and not simply on the battlefield, but we also see Russia attacking civilian infrastructure throughout the winter. What they can't win on the battlefield, they're trying to win by freezing Ukrainians and cutting off the water. But Ukraine is standing strong and is fighting back hard. We and our allies and partners in the 50-some country coalition that supports Ukraine have understood that Russia could end this war any day if it stopped fighting. So if Russia stopped fighting, the war would end. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. And so, as you saw when the President and President Zelensky met in Washington in December, the Ukrainians are committed to continuing to try to fight for their land, and we are now trying to get them what they will need to launch a successful winter and spring offensive, because currently the map on the ground does not favor them.
So I'm curious to know, in this context, what the U.S. position is vis-a-vis India's stand. India's not necessarily always taken the position that Western countries have taken on this conflict, and in particular about the import of Russian oil. Russia, which was selling less than 1% of India's energy needs before this war began, and now it's India's largest energy supplier. I'm curious to know, have you had those conversations with your Indian counterparts?
So we've been having very rich conversations with India throughout this period, including before the war began, when we were worried about it. As you know better than I, India has historic dependencies that go back to the Soviet period, particularly in the security sphere. Almost all of India's weaponry comes from Russia and the Soviet Union. Now you see, not only is Russia not going to be in a position to resupply, but the weapons aren't working too well out there. So we've been having the conversation about diversifying away from that kind of dependency, doing more with the U.S. and with other friends in the defense sector. And of course, on the energy side, India, as you know, buys on the spot market, so it always goes for the best price. So one of the things that we've been talking about before and during and after the decision on an oil price cap by many of us was that this would actually benefit India. So even though you're buying more Russian oil, the fact that you're paying cheaper prices for it is good for India, but it also dries up the revenue that would otherwise contribute to Putin's war machine. So this is where we are now. You're going to buy your oil from somewhere. What we want to ensure is that you're not fueling the war.